It's been a whole 2 days since I last came at you guys with a video, and it's because I didn't really hear much rumors or much information that seemed legitimate to bring to your attention. I saw this one thing about Steph Curry potentially teaming up with LeBron James, and that's when I knew that NBA news was at its absolute slowest. So I decided to take a few days off to see if anything better would come up to bring to your attention. And in those 2 days, it appears as though so much news came down to the NBA that I have a whole laundry list of information to get to you guys, some that are not even going to be included in the title. Almost all of this information, well, most of this information involves big men and a potential internal strife with the Cleveland Cavaliers, although this could be just me reading too deep into things, so you could leave that for your own interpretation. In this video, we're going to be discussing multiple updates for multiple players that are assumed to be on the trade market. Players like PJ Tucker, Andre Drummond, Aaron Gordon, Lamarcus Aldridge, Victor Oladipo, George Hill, and Trevor Ariza. And I'm sure there's a reason why you clicked this video. And yes, it has to do with Myles Turner. And that's probably the latest bit of information that to me seems to be the most interesting out of all of this. So let's get this party started because we have a lot to get to. Slap a like on that like button for the YouTube algorithm, and let's start with what I'm reading about Kevin Love and the Cleveland Cavaliers. So last night, a Twitter account by the name of Monte Macy tweeted out that Kevin Love stole $120 million from the Cleveland Cavaliers, the heist of the century. Now, if you guys don't remember when Kevin Love got paid, it was in the same summer that LeBron James left the Cleveland Cavaliers to the Los Angeles Lakers. And if you remember back then, people were celebrating. Like, the Cavaliers were so happy that they were able to retain one member of their core championship team. There was literally banners saying, "Thank you, Kevin, for signing this contract." And the fact that obviously since then things haven't been so good. Kevin Love's been dealing with injuries. There's been incidents where Kevin Love's been frustrated with the direction of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and Dan Gilbert's an entirely different story because he's not the easiest owner to get along with. But the important part about this tweet is the fact that Colin Sexton liked the tweet. Now, the reason why this is interesting is Kevin Love has only played in 4 games so far this season. He just returned from a calf injury. And obviously, when you're just returning from injury and it's your first couple of games of the season, and Lord knows how good he is in terms of his conditioning, well, obviously, he's not going to be the same player that he once was. I personally tweeted out my own conspiracy theory that maybe Kevin Love's going to play horribly so the Cleveland Cavaliers could be convinced to buy him out so he could potentially latch on with a contender as well. But it appears as though, and this is just my interpretation of the tweet, perhaps either Colin Sexton's frustrated with Kevin Love's role on the roster and the fact that he isn't nearly as good as he once was, or the fact that the Cavaliers are paying him so much and he's not the player that he once was anymore, or this is simply Colin Sexton just making a joke or laughing at a funny tweet. It's whatever you want to interpret this as. Now, I gotta cut to a break real quick here, so cue the intro. Basketball fans, we're in March, and you know what that means. It means that 64 teams are about to lock horns with one another in order to decide who is the best team of them all in one of the craziest basketball tournaments in all of sports. And Draftkings, the leader in one-day fantasy sports, is putting you in the center of the action with a shot at $1 million in total prizes with Draftkings March Survivor Pool. Everyone who enters the Survivor Pool will have a shot at winning $10,000 every single time there is an upset. All you have to do is go to DraftKings.com. New users can use my promo code in order to get a shot at $1 million in total prizes. Enter the DraftKings March Prediction Challenge, pick one team per day of the tournament, and for every day you make a correct pick, you'll move on to the next round, and those who will make it the furthest will be declared the winners. I'm personally going to bet the lot on Cade Cunningham because he is the prospective #1 overall pick in the NBA draft, and either use my promo code TheFlightMike or click the link in the description down below to get a shot at $1 million in total prizes. And thank you to DraftKings for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? That's not technically considered to be an intro because I gave you some news, right? Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about that, but we have a lot more to get into. So for those of you guys that don't know, the Rockets and PJ Tucker have not been on the greatest terms. They haven't been on the greatest terms ever since, well, Russell Westbrook and James Harden came out and demanded a trade. At the same time, PJ Tucker essentially came out and said that the Houston Rockets haven't paid him what he was worth and haven't really respected him. So this is according to The Athletic, which is also by Champs Charania. He made this entire article yesterday just detailing each and every bit of information about a bunch of big trade candidates for the trade deadline that's going to be here in 9 days. And on PJ Tucker, he said that the Rockets remain engaged with several teams, including the Milwaukee Bucks, the Miami Heat, and the Los Angeles Lakers. But sources say Houston's desire for a young, talented player has set a strong price for any deal for a 35-year-old forward. Now, the Brooklyn Nets have been interested in PJ Tucker, and it would be a deal that would have required the Nets to send back Spencer Dinwiddie, but sources say that Brooklyn's no longer believed to be interested in PJ Tucker because they signed Blake Griffin to bolster their front court. Now on to Lamarcus Aldridge, because that's a player that is in one of those situations where he is not going to play until the San Antonio Spurs find a trade partner for him. The Spurs are continuing to explore trades for Lamarcus Aldridge, but should Lamarcus Aldridge receive a buyout, which I honestly think is probably the most likely scenario because he has 1 year left on his contract. He's 35 years old. Let the man go and chase his ring. I'm sure Greg Popovich would let that happen. Well, if that were the case, the Miami Heat, Portland Trail Blazers, and Boston Celtics are expected to be leading suitors. Aldridge currently is on an expiring $24 million contract. Now, for those of you guys that don't know, the OKC Thunder essentially have their entire roster for sale, so long as your name isn't Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and you could have each and every member of that roster so long as you are willing to part with a draft pick of either first round or second round value. And several playoff contenders have interest in George Hill and Trevor Ariza. Now, the Los Angeles Clippers are definitely in the point guard market and are amongst the teams that are interested in George Hill. Hill has been a positive veteran player for OKC, and coupled with the fact that he has another season left on his contract in 2021 to 2022, which is $10 million and partially guaranteed, the Thunder are happy keeping Hill into the second half of the season unless a team meets their asking price for the veteran point guard. Ariza, meanwhile, is on an expiring deal worth $12.8 million. No trade update video would be complete without an Andre Drummond update. So the Los Angeles Lakers and Brooklyn Nets are currently believed to be the lead suitors for Andre Drummond, assuming that he receives a contract buyout after the trade deadline. But the Cavaliers don't want to just give up Andre Drummond for nothing, and the Knicks have also explored the possibility of adding Andre Drummond and potentially even offering him a multi-year deal as a free agent via a buyout. The Cavaliers have so far sought an asset back in any Andre Drummond deal, such as a second-round draft pick, but other teams are skeptical about Cleveland's ability to find one in a trade because Andre Drummond's also due $28.7 million on an expiring contract. So it should be interesting if Drummond hits the buyout market. What is he going to look for? Is he going to look for an opportunity to add a championship, or is he going to look for a team that is willing to pay him what a good traditional center once was worth, which isn't much anymore, but maybe a better contract moving forward? Now, the interesting thing here is I'm hearing rumors, and these are the latest rumors that we have in regards to the Orlando Magic and even the Indiana Pacers. So let's start with the Orlando Magic. The Magic have been open to listening calls on Aaron Gordon, and so far, the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Portland Trail Blazers are amongst the teams that are showing interest. Aaron Gordon has so far spent his entire career in Orlando and is under contract through 2022, but it appears as though he has been regressing throughout the latter part of his career ever since the 2017 to 2018 NBA season. So it seems like these two are inevitably headed towards a divorce, but we say this each and every year, and each and every year, for some reason, the Orlando Magic hold on to Aaron Gordon, so I wouldn't be surprised if he stays on his team. Now, on the other hand, we got an additional report that complements this, and it's the fact that, according to Chris Mannix of Sports Illustrated, rival executives believe that only Jonathan Isaac and Markelle Fultz are considered untouchable on the Orlando Magic. Aaron Gordon and Evan Fournier are available, as is Nikola Vucevic. Now, what's really interesting about this is you can't even trade Jonathan Isaac and Markelle Fultz if you wanted to. Both players are out with injury. So essentially the entire Orlando Magic is for sale, and I honestly think that they need to do whatever it takes to trade both Vucevic and Fournier as much as they can, especially because Vucevic has hit his peak value currently. Honestly, I think a top team for Nikola Vucevic would be a team like the Boston Celtics. I think Vucevic could instantly take them into at least fringe contender land, but that's my own opinion. Now to get to what I believe is probably the most fascinating piece of information I've read so far. Now, originally this came from the NBA Central, a Twitter account, which typically whenever I read reports from this Twitter account, I'm very skeptical. But whenever a beat writer writes a report like this about his own player, on his own team, then I'm going to start taking it a little bit more seriously. So according to the Indy Star, which is obviously Indianapolis's own source, the New York Knicks, Los Angeles Lakers, Los Angeles Clippers, Charlotte Hornets, and New Orleans Pelicans are amongst those who have explored whether the Indiana Pacers are willing to part with Myles Turner. Now, if you remember going back to last summer, Myles Turner was almost traded to the Boston Celtics. Celtic fans, I hope I don't cause you great pain by reminding you of this, but the Pacers offered Myles Turner and Doug McDermott to the Boston Celtics in a potential sign and trade deal for Gordon Hayward. But Boston wanted the deal to include TJ Warren or Victor Oladipo instead of Doug McDermott, and eventually Gordon Hayward said, okay, screw you guys, I'm going to Charlotte to play with LaMelo Ball. Although LaMelo Ball wasn't drafted back then to the Charlotte Hornets, you get what I'm saying. Now, as a Laker fan, as much as I would absolutely love for us to get Myles Turner, I feel like it's a pipe dream for the Indiana Pacers to trade Myles Turner to any team, because he's making $17.5 million in the next 2 seasons before he's going to hit free agency after the 2022 to 2023 season. Now, obviously, if you look at his basic statistics, it's not going to show you that much, because throughout his entire career, he's been about a 13 to 14 points per game scorer, and he's been about a 6 rebounds per game type of rebounder. However, what's really fascinating about Myles Turner is he checks off all the boxes for a modern NBA center. In 2018 to 2019, he was able to convert on 39% of his threes, although that number is down significantly this year to 31%. I do have faith that he could get that number around to the mid-30s again. But what he brings to most NBA teams is the fact that he's a remarkable defensive player that has the offensive skill set that fits the modern NBA big. So I'd imagine the Indiana Pacers wanting a decent return for him. Meaning, I can't imagine the Pacers trading Myles Turner to the Lakers, because what could the Lakers really give up for Myles Turner? As a matter of fact, the only way I could justify this trade or make this trade work for the Lakers is if they gave up Dennis Schroeder and Kyle Kuzma, and that's just detrimental to the Lakers and the Indiana Pacers. However, the Los Angeles Clippers are a completely different story. If they were willing to part with the expiring contract of Lou Williams, trade Ivica Zubac, and trade Luke Kennard, that might be enough to get the Indiana Pacers to bite. However, I'd expect them to want a little bit more draft capital. So if I'm the Indiana Pacers, the team that I would most likely trade Myles Turner to would probably not be a contender. Rather, it would be a team like the New York Knicks. And that's not to say the Knicks aren't contenders, but take a look at this trade potentially for Myles Turner if you're the New York Knicks. You could give up Nerlens Noel, Elfrid Payton, and 2 promising young players, although Kevin Knox, the jury's out on him, and get back Myles Turner in return. And the Knicks also have draft capital as well, so it just makes significantly more sense for them to make such a deal. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about this, because personally, I don't even think the Pacers will trade Myles Turner. And if you enjoy this video, leave a like, consider subscribing and turning on our notifications. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.